Chapter 1370. In the late afternoon, Wilbur led the church militia and arrived at the city of Laclania. It stood at the western border of the Teria, surrounded by a vast forest. In front of the city, a river flowed through an endless grassland. This river marked the boundary between Teria and the recently hostile Ganby. Wilbur ascended the clock tower of Laclania, his gaze traversing the forest and the river, extending toward the expansive grassland. Standing behind him were Cameron and the governor of Laclania, Darwin. Cameron wore a solemn expression, while Darwin was drenched in sweat. Since learning of the impending arrival of the church militia, Darwin had been restless. The Holy Illuminati was a colossal and terrifying entity, and the prospect of a religious war unfolding in the city under his jurisdiction haunted him every moment. The outcome for the city, should the Church of the Fire Dragon Lord be defeated, was beyond contemplation. His own fate, too, would likely be dire. He feared both the Holy Illuminati and the Church of the Fire Dragon Lord, caught between the two ominous powers. The strength of the Holy Illuminati was unquestionable, but the Church of the Fire Dragon Lord was the state religion of Teria, demanding unconditional support for its actions within the city. Effectively, he and the city were naturally aligned with the Church of the Fire Dragon Lord, but the consequences of defeat were dire. A simple man like him could not help but be overwhelmed by fear and trepidation. Wilbur drew his gaze, casting a glance at the sweat-soaked Darwin. With a slight smile, he asked, "Are you afraid?" "No, not at all," Darwin stammered, wiping his forehead anxiously. Wilbur smiled gently. "No need to worry. I assure you, the Holy Illuminati won't set foot in this city." "Yes, of course," Darwin hastily agreed, but his inner thoughts were far from aligned with his spoken assurances. The terrorizing strength of the Holy Illuminati and the immense pressure it exerted could not be dispelled with mere words. Wilbur also sensed that Darwin's words were insincere, but he merely responded casually, "Cameron, pay attention to the movements on the opposite side. If they appear, wake me up." "Yes," Cameron answered with a salute. Wilbur nodded and walked alone down the bell tower, arriving at the room prepared for himself, where he began to meditate. Meanwhile, on the bell tower, Darwin stuttered, "Coco Commander, His Holiness the Pope seems quite confident, huh?" "Yes," Cameron replied expressionlessly. "Ah, His Holiness will definitely repel the Holy Illuminati. He will for sure," Darwin muttered to himself while secretly observing Cameron's expression. Cameron gazed ahead with a poker face. 5 in the afternoon. Cameron, who had been standing still, suddenly moved and turned to run downstairs. Hunched over and aching from standing, Darwin glanced at the grassland and his legs went weak. A well-organized formation emerged in the grassland, steadily approaching. The radiant brilliance of this formation made them appear like a divine army, clearly not an ordinary military force. A terrifying aura overwhelmed Darwin, causing him to collapse directly on the ground. Half an hour later, Wilbur, leading the church militia, crossed the woods and arrived by the riverside. In the past, this was just beyond the borders of the weak countries. These small nations, weak and insignificant, were almost ignored by the Holy Illuminati. Even Wilbur himself did not care. In the world of weak nations, diplomacy was non-existent. "Wait here. I'll go over by myself," Wilbur instructed, crossing the small river and heading towards the grassland. Cameron silently watched Wilbur's figure and said, "If His Holiness falls, charge alongside me and sacrifice everything." "Sacrifice everything," members of the church militia affirmed with determination.